clock on the wall says 10 a.m. And we are officially starting the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee meeting. Everyone, thank you for being here today. The previous minutes, you have before you the May 20th minutes from that meeting. Everyone would have a look. After everyone's had an opportunity to review the minutes, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I, Shirley Guillory, approve the minutes as read.
Thank you, Ms. Shirley. Do we have a second for Ms. Shirley's motion?
I second.
I have a second from Melissa. Thank you. Is there any further discussion before I call for the question? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The minutes are approved unanimously. On old business, any committee member that was not here for the March meeting, there is a code of conduct that the Walton County Board of Commissioners has adopted that they wish for every board member to sign. If you have not signed one of those, please see Kristen after the meeting so that you can obtain a copy and get it completed for us, and we'd appreciate that as a housekeeping item. Under item 4, housing review and miscellaneous, there we had a community land trust update. Teresa Jones was present, but I understand she's out of town. So we'll continue that item to the next meeting, which moves into item B, single family home amendments for owners. Melissa Ward. Melissa, you're on.
Thank you. So I wanted to show you guys something. I don't know if I need to, is it okay to do it from here? Since
Sure.
it's just, okay. So the first thing is, if you get an opportunity, just to sort of understand some of the things, and I'm learning as I go, so I apologize. I'm not the expert in the field of doing some of the great things that people are doing in other communities. I did want to show you this book, Missing Middle Housing. If you haven't seen it, you should get it. Take a look at it. It kind of, for me, it really did help sort of understand what we were talking about a little bit better. And the person who recommended it to me was Kristen Schell. When I was talking to her a little bit about it, she said, you need to look at this. And, you know, because I think in our mind, we have different ideas of what that means. And to be very clear, what I'm talking about is a way for people to build homes that they can afford, or rent homes that are affordable to them in a place that normally wouldn't allow it. And so one of the aspects that we have in Walton County under Chapter 2 are, and categorically for subdivisions, we are limited to density, and density is that specific number that you're approved in your development order. And so when you plat a subdivision, if you're platting a 30-lot subdivision, you can have 30 houses. It is not, now that may change, and I'll leave that up to Stephen to discuss what's happening with placemaking in the area, because it may there may be an opportunity to do more size and scale rather than density, right? So to clarify what I mean, if you have a development and you say, this is what it's going to look like, and it's about how much area the building takes up on each lot, and how much space, how high it is, how big it is in bulk and in size and in character, right? And if that's all you're worried about, because now we have a vision of what we're trying to do, trying to achieve, then the interior of that, how many people live there, is not necessarily, or how many families, is not necessarily the greatest concern. So today, right now, in a residential preservation neighborhood or any platted subdivision, you can have a house on the lot and you can have one accessory dwelling unit. That accessory dwelling unit right now is maxed out at 800 square feet. And the house is not currently maxed out at all, except for 4 stories. and so long as you meet your setbacks. So what we're facing in a lot of areas, especially south of the bay, are what have been, I cringe a little, but what have been termed monster homes, right? Monster homes being really large homes for a single ownership, or more likely short-term rentals, right? And so that very large structure is meant only to accommodate a high occupancy, but it services only one entity, one section, right? So what I wanted to talk about is how we could incentivize putting into our code languages, phrases, and regulations that allow a person, such as myself, let's say I owned a lot in a subdivision down here, and it's designated residential preservation, a lot of Seagrove area. And I don't want to build anything more than a 2,500 square foot house, 2,500 square feet. But I want to allow 2 families to live in it, me in one and somebody else in the other. And it's a duplex, but that's stacked, right? So I live on the downstairs because I'm old. I don't want to take stairs all the time. And I want to let somebody who wants to use the upstairs. Right now the code won't allow it because it's 2 livable structures inside the building that's a duplex. Is that true, Stephen? I want to make sure. I see it as not allowed. I need to.
In instances where the code prohibits or doesn't allow for use of attached single family, and I believe residential preservation is one of those, unless it's identified on the plat, then it would be prohibited.
Okay, and also the size of the second unit is a factor.
Yes.
Okay, and then speaking to residential preservation is 1 per lot.
Right.
All right. So if you were, say, an infill, and I'm only doing this for clarification so that everybody on the board knows. If you had an infill lot, if you do not have at a minimum a 1/4 acre, you could not build a duplex. And if, let's say it was just under a 1/4 of an acre, it's 0.20, not 0.24, 0.25.
Okay.
And you couldn't build a duplex because it's not allowed. It would be considered density-wise too many.
Based on the maximum allowable under the NI zoning.
Okay.
The 8 units, right.
Right, okay. Okay, so my question is, in the chapter for affordable housing, there is some of that language I believe needs to be corrected because it allows for it's intended for people who do developments. It's not intended for the single family homeowner. Maybe it doesn't need to be corrected. Maybe it just needs an addendum that says if you're building a house and that other unit is for workforce or less housing, 80% or less AMI, that you'd be able to build a duplex so long as it meets the scale and character of the neighborhood. That's the general proposal that I'm asking.
How would we define scale and character?
Well, so this gets into another conversation about what Senate Bill 180 but I don't think it's diminishing. So I think it's an added language, an added benefit. I don't think it's restrictive. But I think you can define that under your compatibility, like it is about scale and character. So if the neighborhood generally has 2-story homes that are 3,500 square feet, that's what you can have. If the neighbors to the left and the right, if that sort of thing. And I know y'all are working on that, the large home compatibility factor, and I think the language is fairly clear. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about scale and character. I think that language could be utilized actually better if we are allowing people who want to provide an individual homeowner to build a single family home could say, yes, we could, because you're gonna have the same amount of parking and theoretically same amount of traffic there, because a 3,500 square foot house is no different than 2 1,500 square foot houses that are built together compatibility wise. And if they meet the impervious surface ratio and the setbacks, there's really no reason not to allow it. So that's the question. Is that something, that would be language that we want to move forward with, I think. But I don't know everybody's ideas on that. I'm just asking.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Melissa, thank you very much for bringing these ideas to the committee. I mean, we need to be trying to think creatively to solve our affordable housing deficits in this area. One of the things that you and I have talked about, and I think, a concern is that our county tends to be reactive in a lot of these things and not strategic. And so I think trying to think of every single situation that could happen and write laws to cover that is difficult. So, I think that there may be times when this needs to be considered, but I think it would be hard. I don't know. I'm thinking it would be hard to write an ordinance or something for a occasional thing that might occur. And one or two people or a handful of people wanting to do this doesn't make a big impact. So I understand exactly what you're talking about, and I think that it's definitely something that has to be considered as part of the solution overall. But I think my concern is that we tend to be too reactive rather than strategic, rather than looking with a big vision. And then you end up with kind of patchwork things, because I see that some of this has already happened a little bit down in the old Seagrove area. And it's not that they've allowed second homes to be developed on one lot. It's that they've split single family lots, and you end up with houses kind of pushed back to the side and kind of fit in. And
I will disagree on one particular thing. Splitting a lot so a developer can make more money on a market rate house is not the same thing. And
I understand.
And I don't mean that aggressively. I mean that first of all, Seagrove, God bless them, have 20 years ago needed a Seagrove neighborhood plan, which I can promise you the planning department told them 25 years ago they needed one. And what happened is they waited, and now they've got one, or they're working on one. I'm not sure. Is it fully approved? I think it's fully approved now, the Seagrove neighborhood plan. Okay. So what they're dealing with today is an unfortunate circumstance where maybe the property wasn't zoned residential preservation, and it was, locked down to one per lot. And so all of that was anything that wasn't RPA. It gives you the opportunity to move things around and do things. So what first I would like to agree with you. I think strategic planning is necessary. And I did send the strategic plan out, but I also sent to Kelly an email, and unfortunately I haven't checked my email to see if she was able to respond. Cody Glazer with Florida Housing Coalition had sent me some information about doing a study here, and some information on how what that would look like. I forwarded that to Kelly this morning. I did not, I didn't do it the day I got it, and that's my bad. And the question was, can the Emerald Coast Regional Planning Council do that sort of study? And if so, what does that look like? So maybe later on we can get some feedback on that. But I believe that we are at the stage where we need to be looking at a strategic plan for obtainable and good housing, whether it is affordable or market rate at an attainable rate. But I think we need to look at first what our numbers are here, what that really means, because it's one thing to have the numbers from Tom saying these are the people that we have on the list, and those are valid, hard numbers to look at. They break my heart that we even still have people on the list. But those aren't translating to what's happening in the market. In other words, I have developers who call me who are concerned about doing some housing in the area because they're concerned they don't, quote, have enough people who need it for affordable housing. And I keep trying to find reports that say we do need it, and we do need it. I can send them Tom's report But that's not enough to say by a professional study that we know we have that done. And I think it's time for us to have that.
Yes, Dr. Carolyn.
So and I apologize because I don't know who keeps track of these numbers, but we talked about that at that Earth Day Town Hall, that there is not a shortage in this area for the 80 to 120 AMI housing, that the shortage is in Tom's group, which is the very low income group.
30, 40,
Yes.
50, 60%.
And that's not being, that's not being addressed. And even what you're talking about with building accessory units or making a home into a duplex or something like that, there's, who's going to guarantee that? Is the county going to hire someone who is going to be responsible for oversight of all of this affordable housing? Who's actually keeping track of that? It seems like it's on a good scout
So-
behavior. Do we have someone who tracks all of this affordable housing to review that the people in these units are meeting these income levels?
So we are currently in the process, or the community, the developers are in the process of providing this housing. We really don't have any other than, I think, the Bristol development that's coming online now, that has the set aside affordable units, other than the more subsidized HUD housing and those sort of things. But as far as multifamily and affordable housing in general, the planning does not have a staff person that is tasked with that. We do have tracking mechanisms, tables and other things that we know where the units are. We know how many are supposed to be set aside. But we rely on reporting from the developer on an annual basis, I believe every February, where they supply, those documents indicating that they're, meeting their standards. I will say that just very recently, based off some concerns that I heard from some community members, that one of the developments was not meeting their affordable housing standard. I contacted the folks, the management company and the engineer record, and we went through a process where we looked at those associated costs and if they're meeting the standard. Essentially, they're not meeting it with their set-asides. All of their units are meeting the standard that we initially approved as part of that. So they had to set aside 20% at 120 or below. All of their units now are currently renting at 120% of AMI or below. So they don't have that set aside standard per se. But, when those things fluctuate, we will absolutely require that, we see record of those units being set aside.
I would say, just to pile on to all three of you, the city has a person who is a development coordinator who basically looks at these from the moment of conception to final build out to reporting. We have a new affordable housing complex in the city called Rosemary Place that was actually built under one of the financing programs of HUD, which is a federal program. So they're not just reporting to us, they're reporting back to their financing entity, because sort of, truthing on both sides. We're watching it, we're looking at the reports, but the state and the federal government is also looking at those reports. What you're talking about with the accessory dwelling units, I think that we're all looking at the Senate Bill 180 language about accessory dwelling units, looking at tentative language. I don't know how deeply exactly all of us are going to get into that, other than tracking in our regulations or updating our regulations to track the language within the statute once that's signed, and it probably will be by July 1. But we all have to update our code to allow these accessory dwelling units. Under the circumstances and the spatial requirements, I think we absolutely can build in some spatial requirements so that it is an accessory and not the primary. Which is the primary, which is the accessory dwelling, Where can it be placed? How closely can it go to a parking line? Do we have to provide additional parking for that? Or because it doesn't count in terms of the density of the category it's in, is it just an invisible unit in that respect? But we still have to track this, and we need to know how the statute is being used by our local community. And we do have a person whose primary responsibility is to track all these things so that we know what is being placed where to meet the accessory dwelling unit statute, but also, you know, how is it all market rate? Is it doing what it's supposed to? Because in our area, if it isn't already prohibitive based on a residential subdivision covenant and restriction, and they want to build an accessory dwelling unit, good morning, and want to build an accessory dwelling unit, then it's a matter of meeting certain spatial requirements where it can be placed, how tall it can be, what the square footage is as in relationship to the primary unit. But we also need to be tracking whether or not this bill is successful in providing those units. I can see this having a pretty significant impact in Freeport, not in certain master plan developments, which prohibit a lot of things. Hammock Bay is an example where there's a lot of prohibitive language that's already in place that protects those communities from having a proliferation of accessory dwelling units. But then we have other developments which are not so prohibitive. I see this affecting a lot of folks who want to provide those accessory dwelling units for various reasons. The primary being for senior living population, for people who desire to take care of their elderly parent, who doesn't need to be in a nursing home but needs some additional support and care, be it home health care or just to have them close in case something happens. The other segment of the population I think this is really going to affect are the folks who have their children who are going through the college experience and now are ready to enter the job market, but they don't have the credit yet and they don't have the income yet to live completely independently, and having an accessory dwelling unit is a way to get them established until they can live independently of everything. I think people starting their career for the first time, that's going to be a big thing. Or children are just getting married for the first time. They don't have children yet. An accessory dwelling unit is a way for them to be independent and transition from home to an independent state where they can afford a home. And we all know what the interest rates are right now. And we know what the values are out there based on what people are able to finance. And it's frankly kind of scary for first-time homeowners and folks who are just coming out of college. They're really being priced out of the market in a significant way. So I see this as something that I'm going to really track with great interest in the Freeport area in terms of where and how we can provide accessory dwelling units for these shoulder markets, I'm calling them, really. I'm not talking about things that are being provided for short-term rentals, because that's really not what's happening in Freeport. We're not down on the beach. The monster houses are providing the need for short-term rentals, but I think that the people that are doing it up here are doing it for entirely different reasons, and that's going to be fascinating to watch as well. You know, people may be renting their full-time homes on the market and putting a short-term unit in the back so that they can eyeball their home but do Airbnbs. You know, that's a possibility as well. It's not really a tremendous growing market in the Freeport area, but, you know, it may be long-term rental and a way for you to provide income, that sort of thing. So anyway, all of these things are related, and we're going to need to watch it very carefully. I think we're all going to be talking together in a significant way, the various planning departments like Stephen's house and mine and Chris Wallace's house in Defuniak, about the accessory dwelling unit and how it can be used meaningfully and carefully it's just the way the language is written, we're just gonna have to approach it very cautiously. We realize that we need to approach it, but it's going, to have to be enacted carefully and with great thought process in terms of the historic use, residential preservation, where it's appropriate and how we can put that in our language. So I don't think that it's particularly the county trying to be reactive. I think that we're all trying to handle these different concerns carefully and with caution. You don't want to adopt something that you've got to turn around and revise within 6 months. I mean, all we have to do is wait for the glitch bill, right, Stephen, to know whether or not it's working across the state. But we do want to enact it in a thoughtful way, in a considerate way. And Stephen, I think you probably agree with me that we're
100%.
If I can ask a question on that, so as a committee, are we going to officially recommend this to the BCC once the Senate Bill 180 is passed?
I don't think it's something that we have to make a recommendation on, except it's very possible as we review the language, we may want to ask the city councils and the BCC to use a lot and thought and caution in enacting this bill, and issues that we see as being issues that, as you look at your language, please pay close attention to X, Y, Z in terms of what you do, because we've identified these as concerns or issues that need to be handled thoughtfully. Now, everyone's in the state is going to have to be dealing with Senate Bill 180, and Stephen's going to be talking about that later in the meeting. So these are things that are going to happen for all of us all over the state. And it's really just a matter of, I think, the county commission and the city councils know that this committee is reviewing this language very carefully. We understand that there are going to be areas that are difficult, like in residential preservation areas, as we've talked about, that are going to be difficult to have this kind of thing. But I would like the county and the cities to know that these are things that we're looking at with great interest in our role as being a proponent for affordable housing, and that we realize that these units will be used for a variety of purposes. So at our next meeting, we very well may want to do an open letter or list of, I don't want to say concerns, but say, as in our role as being a proponent for affordable housing, we've identified these areas of interest and areas of need. And while you're adopting your language, we just would like you to keep these things in mind. And I think that's where we need to go with that, because I know that Stephen's folks are really working hard on coming up with that language. In my house, we're doing the same thing, and I'm sure they're doing the same thing in Chris Wallace's house about that. So before we move along, I did want to ask 2 questions. And Melissa, who is the author of Missing Middle Housing, and who publishes that?
It's written by Daniel Paralick with Arthur Nelson. I know the publisher's in here. Island Press.
Okay.
I got it off of Amazon. But before we do get completely off of that, I think one of the things that I was coming forward with, besides talking about potential language to be added to the code, and I do think I meet with more people who want to talk about opportunities to do something not just in South Walton but in other areas, certainly where the zoning on the property is much, much lower, like 1 per 5 acres or 1 per 10. And they want to do something similar to a duplex or a second house. And we just don't have that ability under affordable housing to, even if they wanted to do it at 60% AMI. So I think that's my point, is that there are people out there who want to do it, maybe a small margin, but it's a margin nonetheless. And if they do it themselves, they can control who goes in there as long as they meet those 60% guidelines, or 70 or 50 or whatever.
I think
And-
I think reporting confuses and frightens people, individuals who otherwise might do it, but the fact that there's red tape feels daunting to a
No, I
lot
think
of
that's
folks.
true, and I think that there is a place. So one thing I would say is that I agree with I'm 100% on board with your question, which is who gathers this information and makes sure that we're doing what we're doing. And I hope in the future the county will put somebody in the position of looking at developments across the county with regard to affordable housing. And I don't know that they necessarily, no matter how many times we say it, and quite frankly, Barbara's in the audience, she says it quite often, we need workforce housing. I feel like we need well, frankly, I would like to know, and maybe this is a question I'm asking y'all, I'm asking staff, if we can have somebody like Cody come and talk to us about what they do, or even Kelly, if Emerald Coast does it, that says we can tell you, we need data, right? We need the data of what our housing is, what it is to be like. It's not enough to say, this is how many houses you built, new permits you issued last year, and you need this many to cover your housing market. Because I think it's too vague. I think it talks about a housing market, but it doesn't address, they don't always talk about how many of that is short-term rental. And besides that, how many of those are recreation homes, AKA second homes? Because all of your big PUDs, close to 80% of those homes are second homes. Very few of them are primary homes. So we're talking about really what's the difference between a primary home, which includes our affordable, and the non-primary homes, which can be anything from short-term vacation rentals to just a family come and visits twice a year. Those are the numbers we need. We need real data, and then we can then go to, hopefully, staff or this board could recommend to the county commission that you need to have a staff member dedicated to trying to find a way to make sure we have affordable housing at a level that is needed in the area. And then when they have that information, that data and those statistics, we can look at what are the ways to incentivize people putting that housing in place. And not all of it comes through Tom's department, although I don't know if that's a I don't know how that works with Tom. I know his job is to put people in housing, but the only one thing I ever heard negative about that experience from a property owner was they thought that Tom's department vetted all these people, that they did background checks, that they did all this kind of stuff. And I said, no, I think they're prohibited from doing a lot of that stuff. There's certain things they have to know, but they're looking at financing. How much can you, what level are you at? They don't look at everything else. And so the individual who was doing it thought it was a good idea. Like, this is a good idea. I'll provide housing for somebody. She said the people that she got, some of them, whatever. And what she ended up doing was taking it off of Tom's list because she didn't understand the process.
Well, Madam Chair, with all respect, I think the meeting is kind of getting to just like a discussion now.
Sure.
Maybe we should get back to the agenda and,
So to finalize that one, I apologize. To get back to the statistics in order to understand what we're doing, I don't know if I need to make a motion, but I would like to ask if Cody or Kelly, if they can do the study, could tell us what that involves and what that would look like, so we can just talk about whether or not we want to recommend it.
The parameters of affordable housing study for Walton County. Are you making that in the form of a motion?
Yes, that is my motion.
Do we have a second?
well, if I understand the motion correctly, that you're asking for numbers, or are you asking for a project to be started here that would look at, no, so you just want someone
I'll
to
clarify my
provide, yes,
motion.
thank you.
I would like to make a motion that we have someone, I like Florida Housing Coalition, but we could use Emerald Coast if they do that sort of thing, come and make a presentation as to what's involved in a affordable housing study and how much that costs, so that we can determine so that we can make a recommendation one way or the other. I think we need to know what that costs before we can make a recommendation to the board.
And this is something that's similar in other counties, like
What, Okaloosa?
Okaloosa, like,
Okaloosa did.
okay. Well, I would second a motion like that. Oh, did they?
They did.
Well, it's good to have the information and then pass that on to the county commission. Whether they fund it is up to them, but then we wouldn't have the information to give them. Stephen?
Well, I think what we're talking about here is, you know, a request for proposal process. This would not just be, I mean, you could find an average cost, you know, by speaking to some of these folks that do that work, but the county ultimately, to do a study like that, would have to send it out for an RFP and, you know, accept applications, review, and go through the whole process that we would for any sort of work like that.
Or somebody to just come and tell us what it involves
No,
and what
no,
we
no,
get
no.
out of it? Oh, okay.
No, I'm saying,
Because the
yeah.
request is literally just somebody come tell us.
Right.
So we can know what information we would get and how long would it take, get estimates, whatever.
Make a recommendation to the county commission that this is what we would like to see this done for the county. These are the parameters. This is the approximate cost, go. Yes, Dr. Carolyn.
Okaloosa just went through this process, so can't we just talk to Okaloosa to get some ideas? I mean, I think that they spent money kind of like we spent money on DPZ.
So Okaloosa had several studies done. The one for the strategic attainable housing was different than the one that they just did on their Okaloosa planning update. The one that they did for their ear was close to $1 million. And the one that they did for strategic housing, which was before that, was, it was not cheap. I have not reached out to the people who did that study, but I did reach out to Okaloosa, and that one is, you say recent. I don't know that it's as recent. And I would just as well like to have that whoever did the study to come and talk to us. It's the people who did the study over in Okaloosa Walton study for the yep, that's who it was. W-CHIP, where we have the meetings. But when we went over there for that meeting, and then they started having the housing summit, yes. With the same people who started that program and everything. And it is expensive. And the reason I bring up Florida Housing Coalition is I specifically, and I should have emailed it to everybody when I got the email, but what it said was we do stuff like they did one for Sarasota County, for instance. And when they said, the email said, this can range anywhere from $10,000 to $100,000. This is what they're looking at. What I was getting to is, one, it needs to be more recent, I believe, because the last time we had a housing study was, I don't even know, it was such a long time ago. Two, I think that we need a study specifically on our rural community, such a hard word to say, our rural community, because we are half and less the size of our neighboring counties. It is not sufficient, in my opinion, to say how much did it cost you, and then think that immediately applies to Walton County. So that's where I'm saying I think we need somebody to come and kind of give us an idea.
All right, we've got a motion and a second on the table to invite. And John, just a moment. Yes, ma'am. Yes, Ms. Barber, I'm going to have you up in just a second. Is there any further discussion by the board on the motion and second that's on the floor? Public comment. Ms. Barber, could you please come forward?
Good morning, Barbara Morano, and I always appreciate what this committee is doing and trying to do, and I think you've been working on this for 20 years. I think the person who's missing in this room, has been missing in this room for years, has been a county commissioner. Every time you have an idea, you have one right now, which is the motion, and I quite frankly don't agree that you should even move forward with this because studies happen, they come out, and nothing is done. Right now, you have DPZ, who's going to be here at this room at 4 o'clock. They have, I'm sorry, the South End, thank you. You also have something that I've been saying for years. St. Joe committed to building a 120-unit apartment complex at 80% AMI. 80% AMI 5 years ago was much different than 80% right now. They still have not built it. Also, you have a property appraiser that can give you statistics right now as I stand here. We have apartments in the pipeline. It's been published that there are almost 6,300 apartment units in South Walton. You have Bristol Development Company, and Melissa, this is not something negative, but your particular attorneys fought hard to rezone it. And right now, we don't have anything in that apartment complex. Thank you, Stephen, for doing that check, because I was the one who turned up at that apartment complex and asked them if they were doing 100%. No, everything is market rate. If you go in South Walton, you'll see tons of apartments empty. You'll hear them say 1 month free, 2 months free. So we have units that unfortunately has glutted the marketplace because property has been rezoned for apartments, given developers special perks to do this. And now you're asking for something else when we have to just look at what we really need to do. Christian International committed to doing something that was truly affordable at 40% and 60%. Where are they? They had their property rezoned. They promised the world. Bristol promised the world. Patterson Project promised the world in Freeport. Now we have Live Local, and I'm anxious to hear Stephen say that. That has been enough incentives for developers, but of course it's 120% API. So by doing this, by the potential of a study, by getting a data, I say we're not going in the right direction. I think we have to dig down, look at what we have, and get a commissioner to come to this meeting every time it's absent, absent, absent. So we're not getting to the people, and I don't think the study would really help. So thank you. And I think the property appraiser can give you, and by the way, Melissa, yes, we do agree. This book was given out at the summit, and I recommend that the county buy it for each one of your people on your staff. And I think Stephen or someone can put that in the order for you. And that summit is wonderful. And I think you do have data from Okaloosa. So thank you for thinking. And Melissa, I applaud you for moving forward. But I do think we have to go backward and look what we didn't do and move forward with that. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Barbara.
Barbara, I want to thank you for your comments. I really do. I appreciate exactly what you're saying. And as somebody who has fought for developers to bring in 120% AMI, really, truly, and Barbara knows that, I 100% spend a great deal of time talking to people about bringing in something less than, and I don't mean less than in quality, but the lower AMI. The purpose of that study is the intent that I'm looking for is, and I 100% understand what you're saying about, like we get a study and they sit on a shelf. The purpose is to get an accounting of the primary versus the non-primary units and determine where the needs that we have at the lower income levels. And it's not for apartments. I love apartments, don't get me wrong, I actually do love them. The issue I'm talking about, again, is being able to do something that puts people in the neighborhoods in a way that is non-intrusive to the neighbors and helpful to the people who live in those communities. Those are the two focuses that I have. And it's a laser focus, I'll admit it. So it's okay if the vote on this is no, we don't want to do the study, or we don't have a speaker, right? It's okay to say no, we don't want to have a speaker. But I won't be losing focus on the fact that we need to provide ways for the common everyday person to help their community. I live out in the country now, and I would like on my property to be able to do that, and that's what it's about.
Can we call the question, please?
All right, we've heard the comments, and I would have one more comment. Any study that we ask for the county to do one of the things that will have to be done first and needs to be done regardless if there's a study is a true accounting of what's being rented out there that's at 30%, 40%, 50, up to 120% AMI. Because until we know what's true affordable housing, we won't know what it is that we need. And I think that that's the crux of the matter. How do we verify what's truly being rented out as affordable housing, attainable housing, workforce housing, as opposed to market rate? And when does market rate meet the AMI, and when does it does not? And how can we successfully acquire this information without intruding in anyone's privacy or whatever? How do we acquire that information? I think that that's the first thing we need to know before we move forward with anything. But I will call for the question. All in favor of recommending to the county commission that we obtain, well, not recommending to county, that we have Cody and Kelly come to the council and give a presentation of what affordable housing study might entail. I think we're gonna have to do this by a show of hands to be sure, because we're asking for someone to talk to us about the content of affordable housing. We're not actually recommending to the county commission that one be done. First, we want to know what it would look like. So all of those in favor of having speakers come and tell us about the content of a potential affordable housing committee, please raise your hands at this time and we'll recommend. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. All opposed? We have 1, Dr. Zonia, so the motion passes 4-1. And this is not to recommend a study. This is just to get a speaker in here to talk about the parameters of a study and what that would include. Okay, that motion passed. Next, we have from Stephen Schoen an additional update on the Live Local Act effects on affordable housing. Stephen, thank you. Thank you, sir.
So I went ahead and I asked our land use attorney to find what, or to create a summary of the Senate Bill 1730. And this is what I've provided for you. This is something that she was able to find. I've got the reference there at the bottom in the footer. It came from a Belsen Sumberg. It was created here in May of this year and reflects the proposed changes that have not been signed as of today. At least that's my understanding. So I can kind of go through some of the proposed changes and what they could do to our current Live Local understanding and operation. And I will say that we've really only had one successful Live Local Act project that's made it through the process. I believe we have one currently under review, and there are at least 2 others that we've been approached in a real manner to move forward, but we are waiting on complete applications for those other 2 developments. I will say that what's being proposed will not impact our current application, other than potentially there may be an argument for some parking reductions that may apply there. It will not impact the height limitations we have, nor will it impact the protection increase under 9, the single family. The one that's going through now is not abutting a single family development. And the other 2, one of them, some of this will apply, but I don't think it will impact the development in a negative way. And the other one, it will not impact. It is abutting a couple of developed lots, but not what would be, I think, defined as a single family development, meeting this standard in here for 25 contiguous homes. It's just a few other homes that are abutting that site. So I'll leave it up to you how you want to proceed with the summary here. I can kind of go through the highlighted portions. We can take a minute to look at it, and you can ask me questions. I'll leave it up to you all how you want to proceed here.
Well, this does provide some clarity. It's very straightforward, and these were areas that we've all tossed around at planning meetings and in casual conversations regarding development, and this really does nail it down.
Yeah, and I think that was the intent, really, based on my understanding, is that these changes were really designed to remove some of that, gray area in the previous iterations. So
I think it does.
it
I don't
certainly
particularly
does.
need you to go through it line by line, but this
Okay.
is, I really like the additional of the information regarding environmentally sensitive areas, and the section on additional local government restrictions is very, very clear, particularly in reactive responses. Well, let's just put a moratorium in place so
Right.
nobody can develop. That comes with a hefty price tag, and you better be prepared to defend it.
I still have some questions as far as the mixed use requirements. I will say we have a number of mixed use zoning districts that provide for some required percentages of mix. So I do have some concerns there on how that may play out and how we're going to apply it, based just kind of on the idea that this does speak to local regulations other than what's stipulated here being adhered to. So I don't know if we have a requirement, say in our T&D zoning that says you have to have at least 3 different uses, and those percentages would add to greater than 10%, or if it's just a single mixed use requirement that's greater than 10%. So some of this stuff, I still,
Still just a bit vague. I'm looking at the mixed use, and there's still a couple of questions in my mind of interpretation. I agree with you that I would love some additional clarification on how that's applied.
Yep.
Because I see that as being the, basically the fly in the ointment in terms of moving forward, because it could be argued both ways,
right.
and we know that. Does anyone have any questions for Stephen at this point, now that you're looking at this clarifying doc? I think this is very helpful. I'm working on not the same thing, but just doing a Live Local Act summary of the initial 2023 bill, what changed in 24 and what's changing in 25, so that people that go on the city's website, they'll have this information about Live Local Act. And then we're also adding a section on frequently asked questions. So, what projects are in Freeport, what projects are under review, how do I go about looking at it, who to contact, that kind of thing. But it's just it's purely informational, because my direction from the city attorney is that, we need to get ahead of this thing so that the community is really aware of how this is affected and what the local governments are required to do as a result of this legislation, because I think that there's not a real clear understanding by a lot of members of the public. They think, oh, this is optional. You can't do this. No, this came straight from the legislature, and once it's signed in, we are bound.
Right.
We are honor bound. Yes.
Steve, both of you, actually. The very first one, I just want to make sure that I'm clear on that. The 100% administrative approval, that all LLA projects shall be administratively approved. The difference, the only difference, and it's important to Walton County, is that if it's in a quarter mile within an installation, that a military installation, it doesn't get to skip the public hearings.
Right. I believe that provision from the 24 update stayed.
It stayed in.
Yes.
And so, my only question there, well, that's the only thing, because that has bearing.
It does.
That I just wanna
Especially
make
in
sure.
Freeport.
Yes.
It does, yeah. Eglin affects a lot of, my understanding is the interpretation and installation is anything on that overlay that where if it's in the flight zone or any of that kind of stuff, if it's within any of those corridors, that is also, like, I don't know, is it just the boundary of the property?
I
Because
think
Eglin's a lot of Walton County.
right, the way that I've looked at it, and I think our land use attorney is in agreement, is that it's strictly related to the boundary
Okay.
of Eglin.
Eglin Air Force Base is border,
Yeah. so
everything within a quarter mile of that
property,
border.
Quarter mile out, those are the properties. Okay.
Yep.
That's my understanding
make
as
sure.
well, Stephen. And I asked that same question, okay, how is this applied? And it says boundaries, it doesn't say to include,
Right.
outside of the boundaries, it just doesn't, so, yeah. And that's a good point that we all have to be aware of in this particular community. I mean, Defuniak Springs too.
Yep.
Because it affects them as well. Is there anyone else that has a question regarding this summary? I think it's very useful and helpful, and thank you for pointing out the military language. That's not included here, but it's something that needs to be included in anything that we generate and provide to the public, because that's a consideration as well.
Okay.
Anything else? Stephen, would you happen to have, I know that Matt Carpenter was specifically very much aware and involved and up to date on what was happening on the Orange Avenue. Do you have any updates concerning that project in Defuniak Springs? Chris isn't
I
here.
don't.
I don't either. So what we're going to do is, and this is for Kelly, who's watching us from afar, we'll want to continue the Orange Avenue update to our next meeting and make sure that there's someone here that can address that item before this board. It's not my jurisdiction or yours, so we would need someone from that entity to come and tell us about that and give an update. And then the last item we have under Housing Review and Miscellaneous is the Senate Bill 180 ADU discussion, which I believe we pretty much covered earlier as we, chase rabbits all over this room. Is there something brief that anyone would like to say about Senate Bill 180 and the accessory dwelling unit discussion that we haven't already pounded into shoe leather?
The only, I have a question, and
Okay.
it's really towards Stephen and his land use attorney.
Sure.
So Senate Bill 180, which, unless I'm mistaken, this is the rebuilding after hurricanes, right?
Correct.
And it's an important piece of legislation because on the one side, everybody needs to rebuild as quickly as possible after a hurricane. We all remember Michael and any other hurricane we've had with
Opal,
mass
Eloise,
devastation. Exactly.
Kate.
And
Yes.
so, but what my question is, beside the ADU discussion, is Walton County one of the places, and I say that sort of tongue in cheek, knowing that Florida is hurricane central, is Walton County one of the places that is impacted by the language that limits adoption of more restrictive languages in our code and comp plan that starts in August and doesn't go for 3 years or whatever? Is one of the are we one of those? And if so, what do we, I know it hasn't gone into effect yet, but my understanding is the governor doesn't have to sign Senate Bill 180. It becomes effective if he doesn't veto it.
Right.
I had a meeting with our city attorney last week, and it's our understanding that initially every county and city is affected for the first 3-year period. And then if there is a state of emergency and an event, like a named storm in the Gulf, or there is a landing, everything within 100 miles of that event, the 3 years starts over, that you can't come back and you can't adopt language in your code that provides, that's more restrictive than what you have currently on the books. Now, think about where we are. I'll just use Freeport as an example. We're within 100 miles of Pensacola. We're within 100 miles of Tallahassee. As the crow flies, it's not as you meander on the roadways, it's as the crow flies. We are within 100 miles of Sopchoppy as the crow flies. So any event that lands in the state of Florida, anywhere along the Big Bend area or anywhere on the Gulf of America from Pensacola all the way over to Caravel, that will trigger an automatic restarting of the 3-year period where Freeport would not be able to adopt more stringent standards in its code.
That's the county's take on this so far as well. I mean, obviously, there's some things that,
There's some nuance, but
Yeah.
generally speaking, I'm interested to know, Stephen, how, I know that the DPZ recommendations are just that, they're recommendations. They are not implementing any language. They're not doing the update to the comp plan and land development
Right.
code. They're simply making recommendations. How will the Senate Bill 180 bill, when it goes into effect, affect the ability of staff to fulfill those recommendations if the county commission decides to implement those recommendations?
so, I mean, I think that's a conversation that we still need to have,
I'm
but
sure you're having it every day in your mind and
Yeah.
the background, yes.
yeah, but I mean, I think it can go a couple different ways. Obviously, they're contracted to create this evaluation and appraisal report, which has a number of recommendations in it. So, I think if it comes down to it, we'll have to cherry pick and figure out what could be considered more
agree.
restrictive, and move forward. Because we're also mandated legislatively to do this EIR report. We've submitted our letter. We have until March of next year to make these changes, or then our hands are further tied.
How is the organization formerly known as DEO and DCA? I can never remember the name. They keep changing it to be more business friendly. How is this going to affect the ability of, I'm just going to say DEO for lack of a better term, their ability to meet EAR requirements when we have this bill that basically quashes them in some respects?
Right.
Is this going to, I think this is going to change how we're going to be able to do business at a state level on comprehensive plan amendments, on EAR requirements, on everything.
I will tell you that my concerns were, which I called you, I talked to you about it, is DPC. First of all, let me say, I think they are doing beautiful work. And there's some stuff in there that I actually communicated with them I'd like to see, for instance, moving density out of floodplains. And that could be construed as more restrictive language, even though so I don't know how anybody would see it, but the language specifically opens it up for Burt Harris claims. That bill specifically opens it up for Burt Harris claims. And it's very concerning to me. I'm just telling y'all, I've already been like, please veto this bill. Not because I don't want people to rebuild, but because this section, just take this out. My concern is with placemaking, there's always a give and take.
Right.
A beautiful way to create something, but we want it to look like what we want it to look like. So there's always a perceived limitation. I don't want that to be stopped. I don't want it to be hindered. I don't want to see the county be shackled to cherry picking something that's less restrictive or helps open the door, but not fix the problems that this is meant to fix,
Yeah, I mean,
frankly.
I think we're
I
between a
don't
rock and a
disagree.
hard place.
Yeah,
We're
absolutely.
between a rock and a hard place. There are things we want to accomplish. We want beautiful development that's thoughtful, that's sustainable, and creates environmentally protected areas. But where the lines have to be drawn based on 180, that's going to be something we're all going to be talking about in great detail among the planners and among the community for quite a while. But we'll see how this pans out. If there isn't a glitch bill, I will eat my planner. So there you are. Okay. Does anyone have any other questions for Stephen at this time? Because I think that we're pretty much running out of time. We're 5 minutes past 11. Well, this was a special meeting that we had outside of our normal quarterly meeting. Kristen, do you happen to know the date of our next meeting? We had one in May. That was a normal meeting date. I think we were meeting in alternate months, is that correct? Well, I think normally we would have met in July, 'cause since we were meeting in alternate months, but we had this meeting, this hurry-up meeting. Do you mind terribly sending out a meeting invite to all the members on what our meeting is, and, so that they can have it on their calendar, and you can also know who? Okay, that helps a lot. Because I asked her to send me a meeting invite so that we can tell who all's going to be here to ensure that we have a quorum. I just think that it's a handy little dandy little tool. So normally we would meet every other month, and that meeting would be in July. But the things that are moving from this meeting to the next meeting is going to be the Community Land Trust update from Teresa Jones and the Orange Avenue update. And I don't know who will give that presentation, but we will, I'll ask Kelly to reach out to someone from Defeating Springs to come to that. And
I asked, I'm sorry, on the Orange Avenue update, I did ask Chris Wallace, and he's happy to do it. It's just that he's out of town. So if we set it for July, I think, and let him know as soon as possible, then he'll put it on his calendar.
I believe so, yes. All right. Yes, Miss Barbara. Of course.
Again, I really do want to thank you, but I do want to mention something. The county is working under a 2017 strategic plan. I'm going to say it again. Our county is working under a 2017 strategic plan. They had a workshop with the senior professionals of retired professionals. There's another better name for it. And they have an outline there of what the future should be in a strategic plan. That outline has sat at the county administrator's desk for years. So you're working to put together something, yet the county does not have their overarching plan. How is this committee going to work if the county still doesn't have a direction for 2025?
I don't know that I've ever seen it.
What, the 2017 or even
The 2017, I'm not even sure.
Hopefully it's online. I do have the sketch or the skeleton plan that the retired professionals did, and I'll be happy to send that to you, and you can, but that has not been approved by the BCC. BCC is under some constraints right now. All right, we don't have a true county administrator, as we all know. So yes, you're moving in a direction, you're moving with the land trust, but I'm afraid there are some stoplights in your direction because the county is in disarray. Go ahead.
No, and you bring up such a valid point. I would like to see this 2017 strategic plan. Kristen, if you could put that on our agenda for the 15th, and let's look at it and compare what we're trying to accomplish to what's in that plan.
And I'll send you the skeleton plan that the retired professionals did. That's still sitting on someone's desk.
Send it to Kristen. She'll make sure we all get it.
All right, I'll do that.
Thank you.
So again, I really appreciate you guys have been working for 20 years.
This is information we need because, unfortunately, in this day and age, historical knowledge is not always valued. And we really need to go to back to the beginning. Okay, here's the strategic plan for the county. This is what it says. How do recommendations from this board fit into what the county's trying to accomplish? And if what we're doing is not aligned with that, then all of us for naught. If it needs to be updated so that the crisis of affordable housing is dealt with, then that's a recommendation we can make to the county commission. So I think that we absolutely need to review that, because so many times when we deal with adopted ordinances and interlocal agreements, there are times when we need to go back and we need to review the statute that enacts these things just to make sure that we're proceeding forward in the correct manner. And it's about making sure that you're not overlooking anything important. So thank you for that.
Well, you're
I think
welcome.
that that's something we need to look at, and we can definitely review in terms of not only checking ourselves that we're moving in line with strategic plan, but also saying, this doesn't address the crisis of affordable housing in a meaningful way. Can you please review your strategic plan and update it so that it does?
Right.
And there are probably other issues that need to be resolved as well, but since that is our focus, we can certainly come back with a recommendation to the BCC that, hi, we looked at this, we're concerned because of these things, could you please, address this as something? And I think that point is very well taken, Ms. Barbara.
Thank you. I also want to mention Jay Odom has, I think, one of the first developers who has put in workforce housing on his development on 3280. I don't know if he had to get a variance. He had to go through ZBA. I'm not quite sure. But he was one of the first developers, and I think that was wonderful.
And if you haven't seen that development, it's really quite interesting, and it's a surprise when you come. I had to go out there for another reason.
Is that Nature Walk? The
Yeah.
Nature Walk?
Nature
And-
View. It's
And
in-
he's
it's in our
he's
service area.
donating 5 homes to service people, by the way. And when I went up to talk to him about affordable housing, and I think those houses are, well, we'll see about affordable. But,
But is he donating them, or is he making
he's
them
giving them.
available?
No, he's actually giving them to 5 families.
Well, that's terrific, yeah.
Yes.
And his affordable units, he has an affordable units up on the front on
On the front.
331 and 3280.
For the workforce
for-
housing.
For workforce, and they are, during the time that he's doing development, they're the people that are working there,
Right,
right?
for the, maybe the hotels,
And
et
it'll
cetera.
continue on
Right.
until whatever.
And,
Yeah.
and they're given a choice to work
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And I was going to mention one other thing, and it slipped my mind. Oh, just quickly, I am going to be here for the land trust discussion. I do have some concerns about county land, and just remember that county just gave land for the agricultural center, which is good, and they just gave land to the senior center. And there are lots of people up north who want pickleball courts, and lots of people in the whole county who want more soccer fields. So I'm just afraid of tying up county land in a land trust with a board when you don't even have a commissioner on your committee right here. And I think that that has stopped you, I think, from going forward, and that's a big disconnect. I don't know why that commissioner does not attend. I have brought that up before. If he doesn't want to, I know there are other commissioners that could. His name is always absent. I don't mean to be, I'm just stating facts. His name is always absent on every time.
Okay.
You need to know what's going on. Is somebody part of this commission or
Your
not?
point's well taken.
I've
I'll
said it
have that
before.
discussion with staff. We'll basically have a conversation and see what the general feeling about the BCC and their attendance on these boards.
Right.
I'll
If
check
it's
on
no,
that.
that's fine, then that's no.
I'll check on
Yeah.
that and I'll give you a call.
All right, thank
All
you.
right, I'll find out what the situation is and then give you a call,
And
so
I'll
we
get-
have the real information.
And I'll get the other
No problem.
skeleton strategic plan to
Okay,
Kristen.
that sounds
Okay,
great.
good.
Thank you, Ms. Barbara.
Okay.
All right, any further discussion? I'm ready to hear a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn from Ms. Shirley. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Melissa. We are adjourned at 11:15. Thank you, everyone, for your participation in today's discussion. Thank you for Ms. Barbara representing our public. Stephen, Kristen, thank you for your help. And we'll see you next time.